Matt, welcome to the podcast today. The best thing about this for me at the moment is that you're sitting across the table from me, but we're in your podcast studio.
It's so great.
I love that.
This is how the rest of the world lives. I had no idea.
Yes, you are in the
These
interview.
headphones are terrible. Just kidding. I'm upgrading.
You're So we're sitting across the table. Usually you're sitting over here because you have your own podcast, The Ranch.
Right. The Ranch Podcast, and I focus on education, law enforcement, state and local politics in Idaho, and then fish and game as well.
And one of the things that, so usually when you're in the room, usually when I'm recording my podcast, but you're sitting over there in the corner with your hat down so no one's looking at you, and you're making sure that the audio is good. And one thing I know about you is that when you are passionate about something, you've got a lot to say, which is fantastic for the episode today.
Yeah, I lose composure a little bit. It's a lot, but there's this weird intersection that I've run into of politics, education, and law enforcement. So again, the ranch, my podcast is dealing with 3 out of the 4 of these things. And I started hearing from the different areas, okay, this is a problem. And then I go to the, political world and they're like, oh yeah, this is a problem. And then I go to the law enforcement world, like, oh yeah, this is a problem. So the education, law enforcement, and politics world all know there's this giant problem. And they're all just either pointing at each other or totally walking the other way. And the issue is predominantly that there's this wave of this crisis hitting our children in the tech world that no one is taking responsibility for. No one knows why it's happening from a cost-benefit analysis. So you don't hear schools saying, hey, listen, I know that you don't like that your kindergartner has a school-administered Chromebook. I get it. I'm sorry about that. But what I can tell you is we have actually increased graduation rates by 10%, and we can actually track it back to giving these kids these Chromebooks. So I know it's a little bit of an ask to have a kid with this one-to-one technology, but it's worth it. No one's saying that. No one's saying that at all. And overwhelmingly, you have law enforcement losing their minds over the crisis of our kids being extorted, sextorted, human trafficked. When somebody told me that kids were getting human tracked off of social media and the internet, I'm like, how does that work? Like, what are the mechanics of that? Like, what exactly do you mean? And somebody said, all right, look, a school board friend of mine, he said, all right, look, I have a friend whose daughter is way into fashion. She got approached by somebody in New York, and that person said, hey, look, we're going to fly you to New York. We think you're perfect for like a fashion model. This is our brand. This is our design, this whole thing. She was like, oh, wow. Her dad was into it. He's been supporting her appropriately and monitoring her. He's not just like, oh, go do whatever. So towards the time they buy the ticket, they have the hotel room reserved, the whole thing. And towards the actual event where they were going to jump on the plane, the dad gets some like weird ideas. Like, I don't know about this. Like, something's going on. He reaches out to the police department in New York and tells them what's going on. They're like, give me the information right now. Human trafficking. They were going to get this girl from California to New York based off of almost exclusively social media interactions and then grab her. And that was going to be it. So it's like, wait, how? Like, this is insane. How is this happening? I actually reached out to I've been doing a ton of work with law enforcement and brought this up. And one of the agents that I was working with, the deputy, said, listen, that's elaborate. You can human traffic somebody while they're still living in their own house. Like, wait, how does that work? Because they're not even physically leaving. It's like, it doesn't matter. Look, say you want to sex traffic somebody. You don't have to steal them from their parents. You just have to have something over their head that they're so worried about, they will have sex with anybody so their parents don't find out about. And it starts small, right? They groom, they're like, the whole grooming process, which we won't go into, but they essentially attain something like an inappropriate photo or inappropriate video, or tell the kid that they have this inappropriate photo, inappropriate video. I text you, I'm like, hey, I have a nude photo of you, send me a new one, or I'm sharing this one to everyone. You quite unfortunately do know there might be a nude photo out there that you sent to an old boyfriend or somebody got it. And you're like, oh no, okay, don't do that. Please don't do that. I'll send you another one here. Now they have an actual photo of you and they're like, all right, here's the deal. It was a bluff initially. Now they actually have it. They're like, this is what you're going to do. You're going to meet me in the park tonight. And yeah, we're going to do whatever we're going to do. Or I'm going to send this to your whatever. So you, error in judgment, but you're horrified. You do go to the park. And lo and behold, there's someone else even videotaping this exchange. So now they have multiple pieces of horrific content of you. And then they say, by the way, next time my friend's going to be here. So this person, you, are going back home, mortified, a victim, living in your parents' house. They have no idea what's going on by design because you don't want them to know what's going on. And this is what's happening with our youth. They are being extorted every single day. They're being trafficked in their own houses because they have access to this technology. And we as parents, me and you, have been woefully insufficient in protecting them. Mm-hmm. And so understanding that this is all happening and that at the education, the political, and the law enforcement level, everyone knows, but I have to somehow gain access to all of these people and put everything together to be like, wait a minute, this is crazy. And you and I, just as average parents walking down the street, we would have no idea ever. No idea. There should be people screaming this from the rooftops.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so one of the people that you have spoken with is the SRO officer, Gomez, actually. Yeah.
Yes.
Officer Gomez.
Yeah. Officer and deputy.
Yes. And he is someone who really focuses on this for Idaho. But I would imagine that people around the nation are following this guy too, because he's so good. I saw him years ago at a state PTA event where it was like one of those things where my kids were young and I was sitting in the room and they said, okay, we're going to have, they introduced him and he started talking about different apps that kids can use on their phone to be aware of, ones that you might know. And I was in my early 30s. And admittedly, I thought, well, I know a bunch of stuff. Like, I don't think he's going to present anything I don't know, right? And so he starts talking and all of a sudden he starts getting into apps that I've never heard of and how those are used. And that was kind of like my aha moment as a parent in my early 30s going, oh, I actually don't know. And my ignorance is not benefiting me or my kids.
No. And the problem is this is a national crisis. It's actually a worldwide crisis. Okay. Because a lot of the predation, one of the worst aspects of this is these types of scams have never found representation in our societies before. Because if you're a predator or I'm a predator, somebody's a predator, before 20 years ago, they're like, all right, look, I'm a predator. I'm a terrible person, but I can only be a terrible person in my area. I have geographic proximity. So I might drive 10 miles or 20 miles or whatever it is, but predators could only do things in the area they had access to. And they also had to do them at the same time their victims would be there. So if I'm a predator, I'm like, my specialty is grabbing kids or harassing kids at a grocery store. Well, I have to go to that grocery store at the time window when those poor victims are going to be there. So it's from like 3 o'clock to 6:30 on a weekday. I could probably find a 12-year-old wandering around Albertsons or something, whatever. So I'm limited in my geography. I'm limited in my time. And then if I look like some 55-year-old predator, people look at me, they're like, why is that guy talking to the 12-year-old? What the hell's going on over there? They can optically infer like, hey, there's something going on here. We removed all of that. That's gone. You can't see who's coming after you. It doesn't matter where they are. And they can do it 24 hours a day. So it's like the Nigerian prince email scam, right? That everyone says like, oh, I'm a good, God blessing, sir, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm the Nigerian prince and I have $50 million. I just need to transfer it to a bank account. But it's on a much more sophisticated and widespread scale because it's commoditized. Okay. And let me be clear. Children are different commodities for these individuals. And they're commodities for school districts, they're commodities for predators, they're commodities for brokers, okay? If you're looking at a worldwide extortion broker, he's looking at, say I'm in Russia and I'm in some factory, okay? And I am going to, my job is to extort teens, right? My target audience is like 13 to 17-year-olds. Okay, great, no problem. I treat men and women differently. And by the way, the other thing about this scam, these scams, or this crisis that we're experiencing is that this is a risk arena for teen boys when no risk arena like this has ever existed for boys. We have always known to protect our young women, and rightfully so. If you have a 15 or 16-year-old girl, everybody knows, like, you need to protect your girls, 100%. But a 16-year-old boy largely is viewed as like, look, what's anybody going to do to you? Like, nobody's going to do anything to you, right? It's like, just don't be an idiot. Don't do something to other people. Don't put yourself in bad situations, but like, don't be an idiot. Now, because 16-year-old boys are so hardwired to respond to interested women, there's your limbic system actually regulates fighting, fornicating, food, all kinds of different things. It's your lizard brain. and it hijacks your prefrontal cortex and takes over your proper decision-making process. You no longer have control of your body. So when people talk about 16-year-olds being like monkeys, they actually are monkeys if given the right stimulus. They lose their mind. They can't process or think of long-term consequences or cost-benefit analysis, anything like that. So women, the product for women is largely like a young woman. The product for them is actually getting a photo, okay? Because you can then take that photo and you can sell it, okay, on the black market or whatever, and that's terrible. There is some degree of extortion going on there, but it's less prevalent because we've trained girls like, look, if something happens like this, blah, blah, blah. Plus we have social media, so they're less embarrassed about it. Like you could go onto Instagram all day long and see people in butt shots and leg day and beaches and all this stuff. So it's like, okay, I'm embarrassed about it. They got this photo of me. Like, that's not good. It's not as embarrassing if you get a 16-year-old boy sending a nude photo of himself to somebody. Yes, the actual photo is a product that can be sold on the black market, but now he is a money generating machine because you have the lure over him. You have the extortion over him, and they will do anything to not have that be seen. The amount of shame and hesitation and social anxiety that young men get when it relates to them being exposed for the pervy, crazy people they are. It's like, look, relax, kid. Like, we've all been in this situation. Like, we would rather you be here than you commit suicide because you don't want to tell anyone. So we've commoditized, right? The predators have commoditized our children and use them in different ways, but they need technology to do that. They need some entry point to connect with our children from Russia, from the Ivory Coast, from wherever. If you take those away, it's impossible to do. But not only have we as parents been neglectful, right? And fine, we didn't know, and we really didn't, right? And especially with COVID, we just like, look, people got really worried. It was like, look, whatever, I got to keep my kid in school. My family didn't have iPads and one-to-one technology with our kids at all. And all of a sudden, I remember last night, I had the most adorable photo of my kindergartner. He would go to Catholic school in California. We took him out of the public school, and he had his little polo shirt on. He was going to the school called St. Isidore. He had his polo shirt on. He's a little blonde hair kid, and he had his blue light glasses on, and he was like smiling at our little counter. And he was like 6, right? And like, oh my God, look at him. He's making the best of it. Like, he's trying. And we would sometimes peek onto the like Zoom calls because he's on Zoom and he's 6. And we're like, oh, this is so fun. All these things. That was the entry for technology to all of our children. And no large entity immediately walked it back when we could. No one said, okay, we got wireless, we got Wi-Fi to these kids. We got one-to-one technology with these kids. Yes, we had to do it because they had no other option, but now that is past. This is over. We need to take this back. No one has done that.
So a couple of different things. One, I mean, you're talking about here, and I really like how you got to it, all these different components, and you're saying it's the technology, right? The being able to extort children in different ways and use them as a commodity in different ways. It's the technology that is the avenue to be able to do this. Now, what's interesting is that technology is being used in different ways on our kids, and some of it feels like it's not a big deal. Like, well, what would be a big deal about having a computer issued by the school, right, to be able to use the technology? At least that's what it feels like, I feel, in some measure. But then to kind of continue on with this app concept just a little bit,
Sure.
Just recently on the national level, Mark Zuckerberg was held accountable as the CEO of Meta for what he's done as an app developer, and more specifically, what he has not done as an app developer. And he had to stand in the committee, the congressional room, turn around while all of these mothers held up photos of their children who no longer live on this earth because of experiences that they had had through Meta. And basically those, I can't remember if it was senators or representatives, right, but basically they said, you could have done something, Zuckerberg, and you didn't. And I think that that's a really important point to kind of note as a parent, particularly, that it might feel, or we might think or want to think, that these things are not that bad, or they're safe. And look, my kid just looks at all of his friends on Instagram. But there are real dangers out there. And if we as parents don't educate ourselves on them, our children, we leave our children exposed.
Look, 100% yes. And what people need to realize, you bring up Facebook, you bring up Zuckerberg, that's Meta, right? That's the larger, I'm just making a point. Meta actually recently went to, I believe, end-to-end encryption, which means here Zuckerberg is apologizing to these parents who've lost their children because of interaction they had on his platform. And then the next day, they make it so that they encrypt the end-to-end communication. So if I'm a predator and I send you a fake naked picture of me because I'm trying to elicit a fake naked or a real naked picture from you, and then you send me one and then you think better of it because I start extorting you or you're like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have done that. You go to Meta and say, hey, can I have my history because I would like to blah, blah. They're like, sorry, it's gone. It's gone. What people do not understand is the app developers are not dealing with this crisis of child predation and suicide and extortion. They're not dealing with it as an unfortunate byproduct of this hyper valuable and super important technology. They're presenting it as a feature of the technology. The fact that our kids are getting extorted is not an accident. It's a feature of the tech. Okay, what I mean by that is if Snapchat is a very famous classic example of it. They have end-to-end technology or end-to-end encryption. They delete images right away. They disappear, all of these different things. So you have people time and time again getting extorted, sextortion, the whole thing, right? Snapchat could turn that off instantly. All they had to do is say, okay, we are no longer going to end-to-end encrypt, and their app would die instantaneously. Why? Because they know people want to be able to send inappropriate things that they don't want any evidence of. It's a feature of the app. There is no question about what it's doing to our children, how we're getting exposed to it. It's a feature of the application. They're designing these things so they can be utilized in this manner.
Yes. And another thing that I think is really important to note, I mean, there are people out there trying to work on this. So just recently, Idaho had a senator who is is a software engineer, developer, something like that, and had worked in that field for 30 years. And so he, over the last couple of years, has been working to try to develop a law that would help our kids in some manner. So this year, the law was focused on the software engineer component. And it was, for the cell phone. If you go in, there is a way on a child's cell phone to turn on child features, like that they are a minor on the phone. Most parents are not even aware that there is a feature to be able to do that. But in order to be able to do that, it's a very convoluted system. I spoke to a gentleman, I think out of Michigan, and he was saying that he has a whole kind of article page on one of his websites, because he focuses on like technology and safety for kids, that kind of walks a parent through how to do this. I mean, it's very complicated. It's not just like a little one-over switch button. So this piece of legislation would have said, hey, software developer, we're holding you accountable. And that means that when a phone is purchased for a minor, which happens every day, the automatic is that it's on child safety. That's what the law was written for. It's going to automatically be for child safety. It didn't make it out of, I think it made it out of committee, but never.
It's dead.
It died. The bill died. The bill died. And one of the biggest, it was so interesting because I listened to lobbyists for tech companies. They were all virtual testimonies, but I happened to be sitting in the room. They were all virtual testimonies on why this is a First Amendment right issue. They just kept arguing it's a First Amendment right issue over and over and over. And it was so fascinating because several individuals had flown from all over the country to be here because in Idaho, this was the first time they were trying to get at this issue from a software engineering perspective angle. And it died. And this was I think this is the second year they've tried. They tried last year and now it's, this year. And I mean, I'm grateful for it's Senator Cook. He's been working hard on this. It's something he really cares about. He worked with lots of different associations around the state and lots of other people around the nation. And yet there are people out there that want to kill these bills because they don't want to hold the people who are creating them accountable. And so that kind of leaves us in this position as parents and community members to say, one, we need to be aware of these things, but two, what is it that we really can do about these issues? And that's where I feel like my connection with you really comes in, because you as a podcaster have been interviewing you've interviewed law enforcement. I mean, you interviewed, I think, a neurologist about, right, the impacts of technology. You interviewed someone from our kids' school district. Our kids go to the same school district. You interviewed him to find out, like, hey, what type of value is a Chromebook, or computer for,
and people outside of our district, innovation, tech integration, the whole thing.
You've been doing all of this stuff. So I think there's a couple of different like compartments of this in my mind. So you've got like the software, right, to be aware of that kind of, I always kind of view it as like Officer Gomez, like that kind of perspective of, hey, as a parent, there are things that we need to be aware of. And before we kind of move on to the next feature from my perspective, which is, technology in schools, I do want, if you're willing, to kind of highlight something that you're working on with Officer Gomez, because I think it's really awesome, and for people to be aware of that this is coming as a resource for parents.
I appreciate that. So yes, and I have a couple things to say.
Yeah.
We are, Deputy Gomez and I are working on a program to educate. The idea that we're going to educate kids out of this is nonsense. Okay. And we need to educate meaningfully and effectively at scale the parent population in the United States as fast as possible. Let me give you a couple pieces. So first off, the technology will never be the solution. And this is where the political aspect merges into this as well. So you have the education aspect, political aspect, law enforcement aspect. The political aspect merges into this really quickly when you see, hey, why does anyone care about a 1.9 million population state like Idaho? Like, why would tech people fly from across the country to stop us from putting some dumb little toggle switch on these cell phones standard, like the organ donor? You're a standard organ donor when you get your license. Why would they do that? And it's because they know if states start putting legislation in place like this, it's going to be dominoes falling. Their position is, I'm not responsible for the horrifically sharp Japanese knife that you purchased and your kid accidentally killed himself with. That's on you to buy whatever knife you want. But they also don't want the schools to stop using Japanese knives. They're like, all right, look, these things need to be as powerful and universal as possible, but we also need to get them in the hands of every single kid everywhere. That will never work, right? The politics of this will go on forever. The actual technology is irrelevant. Okay, every phone we buy for a minor, it's going to have a toggle switch. How many burner phones do you have in your house? And by burner phones, I mean a piece of technology that you have forgotten about from the last 10 years, stuffed in an office drawer, stuffed in some cabinet somewhere. You might have given it to your kid to use when they were younger, to like watch movies on a plane. We have old pieces of technology that are perfectly happy to log into a Wi-Fi and start humming along, and we don't even know they're there.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you say that, and I think about how I just came home from a vacation with part of my family. So like one of my kids was left behind, and I went to go put her to bed the other night, and she's 12, and I saw that she had this iPad, and I was like, yo, what's that? And she was like, oh, I found it and I charged it. And I was like, oh, snap. Okay, well, I'm going to take that from you, and now I'm going to start and no, you don't have, right? It exactly, I mean, that happened with my first kid, 10 years ago. And here I am as a parent, it's happening. It was just a repeat after, child number 4. Like, yeah, it happens to me in my house.
It's literally like you hide guns throughout your house, and then a kid finds them and you forgot about it. But here's the key. It's not going to be tech. It's not going to be politics. They're not going to save us. It's not going to be the tech companies because they don't want to save us, right? It's not going to be removing the technology because we accidentally have left these horrifically dangerous pieces of technology lying around our house haphazardly, and the education system has sold out our kids and is supplying technology that they know is being used to hurt our kids. They're not going to save us. Parents are going to need to save their kids. This is the only option. Let me ask you this. How many times have you heard a parent or anyone call Albertsons and tell Albertsons grocery store, hey, you need to make your store safer? No one in the history of the world has ever said that, right? Just like, it's Albertsons. It's not their responsibility to keep your kids safe. Exactly. How many times has a kid been distracted driving a Ford F-150, gotten in an accident, and the parent was like, hey, Ford, make your car safer so my kid can use it inappropriately and get in an accident and not get in an accident? No one. We know cars are dangerous. We know grocery stores are a threat arena for children. We train our children and act appropriately because we understand the risk engaged there. We understand what we're putting our kid into. You and I would likely never let a 6-year-old that we were in charge of, that was one of our babies, wander into Albertsons for an hour by themselves. And that's Albertsons. That's a grocery store. I would never do it. I'd be horrified. I'd be running in there instantaneously. Like, is my kid still here? Like, who's grabbed him? Does somebody have him? And that's our grocery store. We go there with our kids all the time, weekly. Yet it's so dangerous, we wouldn't let our kid go in by ourselves. We as parents can manage risk and safety of our children if we know that there's a threat, if we understand the threat arena, if we understand what the mechanics are, how this works, why they're in danger, and we can do something about it. It will never be the politics. It will never be the tech companies. It will never be the technology itself. These are all pieces, but until parents get educated and parents understand how to fortify and protect their kids, our kids will always be at risk. That's the program Gomez and I are working on, which is to train parents, people who are hyper distracted, have no time. You can offer presentations in your local school. Great. Thursday, 7:00. Well, shoot, I got to get a babysitter. Like 7:00 is like bath time or like whatever. Officer Gomez will go to places. He's told me recently, he's flown to places in Texas. He goes all over the United States. He's like, there are 4 people in the room. Here they fly me there. There are grants out there trying to pay people to come and educate people. And you cannot get parents to even show up because geographic and temporal proximity, you can't get them in the middle school auditorium at the exact time when the professional is there, and they don't understand the threat.
Well, I think they don't understand the threat, but a part of it is, I think a lot of people just think it's not going to happen to them, or it's not that big of a deal. Because this is something that I've seen as a nonprofit leader and several of the things that I've done, because I've tried to facilitate these conversations before with parents, and I get a decent showing, sure, right? If we pick a time, and you got to be really strategic about that time that's picked, but it's so often I almost hate to say it, but for a lot of people, I think it's ignorance is bliss.
I think, yes, I think there's a portion of the parent population that has always said like, hey, look, and we have to do this with our teenagers anyway. It's like Saturday morning or Sunday morning rolls around. What'd you do last night? Nothing. And you're like, damn it, man. Damn it. I know you're lying to me. Or like, hey, did you get all your homework done? Yep.
Oh yeah.
Like, do you have to dig it? Because you're like, all right, look, if I dig in, here it comes. So there's an aspect of child rearing, especially with teenagers, where there's some level of fibbing going on, but you don't want to make the relationship one of disbelief and squirreliness. You want to instill some degree of I trust you and don't betray my trust. You have to build trust. You have to give them opportunities to lie to you, and then hopefully they haven't.
Well, I will say this though. I totally agree because there is I don't want to be a helicopter parent,
sure.
Right? And you're right. I mean, I remember sneaking out of my house, right?
I never snuck out of my house. Everyone in the world has snuck out of their house. Anyway.
Yeah. Going. And, but there is something different though, when I say ignorance is bliss, in terms of it actually requires a lot of effort and vigilance to be on top of the technology. And on some level, I think that for some parents, and it's not a judgment on these parents in that way. Like, oh, I don't think I'm not saying they're a terrible parent, but there is a level of, there's a lot of effort. And we have so many parents today who, gosh, we have like 2-income families, or, like single parents. Yeah. There's so many things going on. I mean, I just had this experience, within the last couple of days, where I was talking to a school administrator, and I was thinking, as she asked me a question, I thought, I don't have all of maybe the best answers for this. I just know that I'm bothered by this thing, but I have so many other things on my radar. It's hard to keep track of all the things. And so, okay, I have a few child safety features on my kid's phone. I think I'm doing okay.
Right.
Right. That's the hard part, is getting over that hump to say, and that's why I think a lot of parents are like, hey, I can't show up on Wednesday at 7 p.m.
100%.
Right.
It's not, when you say ignorance is bliss, I think you're 100% right that there's a certain portion of the population which is like, look, as a function of my relationship with my kid, I'm going to have to give them a longer leash because they're 16 or 17. I also think there's a portion of the population, and again, no judgment. I think life is really hard, but I think there's a portion of the population who is like, I'm out. Like, I'm so burnt, whatever. Like, nobody's reaching through the iPad to grab my kid. Not entirely true, but fine. And it's helping those people recognize, like, okay, well, first off, to get your kid to do what this person wants, they don't need to reach through. They know how to manipulate children, right? And telling them that they have to track, if you have to track an application or track different apps, this is a failing endeavor. And this is one of the shortcomings of some of the ICAC, that's Internet Crimes Against Children. This is some of the shortcomings with people I've talked to in other states. Idaho, it seems to me, is predominantly doing a very good job. But in other states, I've spoken to these detectives and they're like, look, what we do is we take 25 iPads and we go meet with 25 parents, as if 25 parents is going to make a dent in anything. They give the parents the iPads and they walk them through 3-ish apps. And they're like, these are the functions of the apps. This is why it's blah, blah, blah. The app is irrelevant. If Snapchat goes down today, there will be Snapchat 2.0 tomorrow. And it's like you're going to play whack-a-mole with the greatest app development system in the entire world, and they know the money comes from getting more users on this. The more and the way you get more users is obviously you make it a riskier app. You don't make it something where like people are monitoring what you're saying. You don't make it something where police officers can get a hold of you. So monitoring the apps is a failed system. Educating on specific apps is a failed system. What you need is tracking the function of any app. Is there a two-way communication system with the application? That is the number one question people should ask themselves of every single app.
And what does that even mean?
Okay, so look, a one-way communication system would be something like, I say I really like cycling, okay, and I have a Strava app that tracks my cycling, and I broadcast out into the world, hey, this was my cycling route. I rode up the mountain today. This is how fast I'm going, blah, 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 blah. And I have no comments or anything engaged in that. No likes, no like thumbs up, no nothing, right?
So like most of my posts.
Most of your posts. Not by design though, So that's a one-way communication where I broadcast something about myself. And you also saw this embedded in, this was one of the first big security scares where people were posting pictures of themselves with their children. And the photos themselves had geolocation turned on. So all of a sudden, somebody in the middle of nowhere could get a photo and be like, where's that kid live? And they could find it from the photo. And this is when people started freaking out. This was like 10, 15 years ago. They're like, oh, don't take pictures with your kids. I'm like, oh, don't make sure you turn off geolocation. Like, that's crazy, right? Anyway, one-way communication. Two-way communication is you say something, I say something back. Now, that's obviously a very classic messaging system, right? Like Snapchat or Instagram or whatever it might be. That's not what those are horrible and really risky things, but that's not the end of the story, because you have things like, I mentioned the Strava app, the Fitbit app. You go to Fitbit right now and you're like, gosh, I would love to share my progress. How can I do that? Don't worry. Fitbit has a 2 million person community and they can upload pictures. They can have conversations. They can support each other. It's great. And guess what happens? In all these scams, and we go into in the program with Gomez, in all these scams, you need a couple key things to fundamentally work, the mechanics. And one of them is a lure. You need something that a kid wants. Okay, now this could be a product. This could be low risk, intimacy, right? Sexual engagement with people. It could be social validation. It could be a party. It could be friends. It could be anything. Okay, you need something that a kid wants to get them to start behaving in a certain way. The lure on Fitbit, you could see an overweight 13 or 14-year-old who gets a Fitbit app is trying to lose some pounds and trying to look better because, by the way, they're horrified with how they look compared to the rest of the world, starts posting progress pics. Oh my God, you're doing so great. Send another progress. Are those your new shoes? Oh my gosh, what do your running shorts look like? Oh my gosh. One after another after another. this is an app that is not designed specifically like Snapchat would be, but it is an app that can be utilized because of the function of two-way communication. It's not the app, it's the function of the app. That is something that we could potentially legislate, which is to warn people, hey, look, you buy a salad dressing now. They're like, the Surgeon General does warn that this could cause cancer and is bad for, like, pregnant ladies or something, right? We have warnings everywhere with gluten-free warnings, whatever. Why can't we have a warning on an app that says communication turned on or off? Two-way communication possible. And then people know, oh, whoa. You can have an app that dies with you, right? Like you engage in this thing. It is a closed loop, baby. Nobody is coming from Russia. Nobody's coming from Africa. Nobody's coming from wherever. Nobody's gaining access to my child while my child is sitting in his bed upstairs on an app, which is exactly what happens. He's in bed and somebody from Russia pings him. So again, yes, parents are exhausted. Ignorance is bliss, but it's also very convoluted. Do you track the apps or do you track the function? Mm-hmm. Do you talk to the kids? Do you talk to the parents? Yes, it's a lot. But if you start with a couple key questions, which is, look, what's the communication capacity of this app? That will at least help you identify which apps are more and less risky. And that's a start for people. It's not the end, but it's a start.
So it's April. And when will this this package be available?
It's going to be available at the start of this coming school year.
Okay.
And what the real big problem that we're also realizing is there's going to be enormous pushback to help integrate this even within school systems, because quite unfortunately, most school systems now have one-to-one technology. And we talk about the one-to-one technology that is utilized in school systems that, by the way, if you call your sheriff right now, anybody in the country, anyone listening to this, call your sheriff right now, ask to talk to an ICAC detective, say it's off the record. Do you have my school district's technology in your evidence locker? Their answer will be yes. You go to your next school board meeting, send an email, even better, have it recorded. School board member, do you have any knowledge of the school technology being used in predation cases against students? Don't say, I don't know.
And what does that mean?
So what that means is, all right, so I get a Chromebook or I get a tablet or something from my school district and it's delivered to me. They're like, hey, Matt, you're in 6th grade or you're in 4th grade or whatever. And we need you to have this. And you're like, what do you mean? And your parents don't argue because your parents are running around chasing down 1,000 things. And by the way, we're leaving the world of paper textbooks and moving on to digital textbooks. So they're like, hey, you have to have this because your math textbook is actually on this tablet or on this Chromebook or whatever it might be. It's like, okay, why? I don't know. We still have to pay for them. But no. It's just so we can modify them, right? Because I don't like chapter 12. So if we had an actual physical textbook, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to modify chapter 12. Okay, last I checked, we had handouts when I was in school. And it's like, okay, instead of chapter 12, we're going to go off this little 20-page handout, whatever it is. So what happens is they administer these Chromebooks under the guise of it is part of our educational system. We have now required that people in every grade level have one-to-one technology in most school districts.
And they're selling it like it's this amazing thing.
Right.
Look, we are now providing this one-to-one with our kids. Look how amazing our district is. Okay, right. So and officially, just so everyone following along the conversation, we've moved now from apps over to the school system and technology. I just want to make note of that.
Right. And again, this is where the education piece comes in. If you ask, do you have data to support the idea that this technology improves the educational system in which my student exists? They will say no. Has it increased graduation rates? Nope. Has it increased literacy? Nope. Can it be used? Can you use a computer lab for literacy intervention? Yeah, absolutely. Do you need to send a kid home with a Chromebook to do that? No, you don't. And they were doing this successfully pre-2020, right? So they say, hey, there are these functions on it. But the question remains, do you have data to support the idea that the juice is worth the squeeze? You have just supplied, in a large school district, 40,000 people, you have just supplied 40,000 Chromebooks to the population. Do you have data supporting not just the cost and the difficulty of doing this, but do you have data to support the academic value of it? They will say no. That data does not exist.
So, and who is telling you that it does not exist?
So, very good question.
Okay.
I have actually spoken to a lot of people in and out of my district. Not a single one of them can point to a case that says this is why we have Chromebooks. Point in case, I spoke to the chief academic officer of West Ada on a podcast and asked him point blank, why are we giving these kids Chromebooks? And my specific focus is, the initial volley is, why are we giving K through 5 Chromebooks? Well, we need them for intervention. And I don't think the individual I was speaking with is like mean-spirited or anything. It's like, well, we use them for reading intervention. So we absolutely have to have a kid reading by 3rd grade proficiently, right? Like we go through many in-person interventions with teachers, resource officers, parents, and then the last piece is the Chromebook. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But just by the nature of the intervention, that's not the average student. That's like an exception. That's not the rule. Why are we giving them Chromebooks? And if you're saying we need the Chromebook in 3rd grade for an intervention, why are you giving it to kindergartners? Why are we doing these things? At no point did he, as the chief academic officer, look at me and say, because it improves our graduation rates, because it makes our kids smarter. I spoke to a gal who's a chief tech integration and innovation officer, not in this school district, but a different one. Again, another podcast. Asked her point blank, why are we giving K through 5 Chromebooks? And she said, well, we don't want 8th graders learning how to type. I said, okay, well, first off, I was going through middle school in the 90s. I learned how to type. Like we had a computer at home. We can learn how to type. We also had a computer lab, as every school does. You want to take kids in half an hour once a week, twice a week, have them type? Fine. Every library has banks of computers. Why are we giving K through 5 Chromebooks? Another individual who is in the same school district, wonderful gal, really, really great educator. She's in it to win it. She said, well, here's the problem. And this is a classic one. I love it. Kids are going to be exposed to technology. Okay, you got me there. 100%. They're going to be exposed to technology. And we don't know if the parents are going to teach them how to use the technology safely and successfully. So we have to do it. And I said, all right, look, the second you start saying that you as a government entity and an educational entity have to save kids from the bad teachings of their parents, I get itchy. I can't. If you're telling me you have to give a kindergartner a Chromebook because I, the parent, might have a bad relationship with technology with my kid, what are you talking about? First off, what are you doing with my kindergartner in the Chromebook to justify that statement? You're not teaching them how to do anything on technology. You're literally having them turn it on and off, but you're giving it to them. And the worst part is the districts put it on the parents if there's a problem.
Yes, they do. Case in point, I mean, I had an experience like that recently where I had, you and I have had this conversation, like this ongoing conversation of, okay, well, the district issues the computer, and me as the parent, I'm thinking, okay, well, they're controlling the safety features on this computer. My kid has access to an iPad. I control the safety features very carefully. She checks it in and out, doesn't stay in a room, all of those things. While my kid is told that she has to bring that computer to and from school, has to be charged at home because there really is not an adequate amount of space. Our schools are not built that way.
They don't have charging banks and all kinds of things.
No, they don't. So then all of a sudden I get this notification one day that my kid has searched something on the computer. Okay. And I'm not surprised, like, okay, middle schooler curious about something. This is not the first time that this has happened to me. And I'm not frustrated by my child's curiosity. That's normal.
Right.
But the thing that frustrated me about the whole experience was that, I get the email, the notification, we just wanted to let you know, view the attachment. So I view the attachment, I can see what my child looked up, I can see the timestamp on it, and I can see the image, all of these different things. And I'm thinking, my first thought is, why is my child able to search this and this comes up on the computer? Like, why is that even happening? And I thought that there were safety features on this computer that my kid was getting. Like, all of a sudden now, all of these questions are starting to arise. So I call the school because I remember from years prior having another student look up something and the school kind of taking care of it right away and, notifying that kid. So I call and I talk to the administrator, and the administrator basically, she basically asked, like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, we've notified
Right.
you. And I said, well, you issued this computer. You created this problem. I did not. And I would like you to notify my student that you know what they did. I want my kid to have to feel that consequence of looking up something from someone who's issued the device. They're accountable to you for this. And the response was, well, if we did that on every first time, I'd be spending my entire day talking to kids about what they did, what they shouldn't be looking at on their computer. She's like, we notify kids. We make announcements over the, intercom. We send an email. Like, we're notifying them. And I was like, well, I don't doubt that you would probably spend a lot of time talking to students, like, acknowledging what she's saying here and then reaffirming my request. I'm going to talk to my kid at home. I want you to talk to my kid at school. And so kind of reluctantly, she makes this concession that, okay, she'll do this. And so I inform my kid that this is what's going to happen. My kid goes, she has a very pleasant interaction with the, it's pleasant. She learns from it. We have a conversation later. But the probably one of the biggest feelings for me in this interaction was, school, you issued the computer. I would never give my 6th grader a computer. I don't think she needs one at all. I think she's fully capable of learning all the things she needs to without a computer. And so that's kind of the frustration for me in some measure when it comes to technology and issuing, and kind of what you're talking about, this, why do K-5, why do they need to have individual computers? Because from my estimation, maybe it's just creating I think it's creating more problems than it's solving.
I love that you gave this example, because this brings us wholly back to education is not going to fix this. They are creating a problem. They're participating in a problem, and they want no responsibility with fixing it. Can you imagine the amount of time, family time that's spent with people responding to these inappropriate searches at home from oh, I'm sorry, school. You want to make sure that my kid has this. You don't have an academic reason for them to have it. And now it's my problem to pick up the pieces. And the answer is, yeah, it is. It is. It is our problem. Parents are the only ones that are going to save their children. The education system is not. The political system will not. And law enforcement cannot. They can't. They don't have the manpower. I spoke with the sheriff just this morning, and he said, look, my chief ICAC officer, detective, and that's Internet Crimes Against Children again, his chief detective literally said when he has 10 minutes, if he has 10 minutes free, he's like, I can order up a sex predator. I can order up a horrible person instantaneously. He just picks up his phone, a couple little things, and boom, somebody essentially comes walking into the police department, or excuse me, the sheriff's office to, because they're committing crimes. He's like, it's so easy to do because they're everywhere. They're never going to be able to stop it. The legislator will not stop it. The education system will not stop it. And they're letting you know in no uncertain terms, yes, we're inserting this risky piece of technology into your hands. We're not going to tell you how risky. We're not going to tell you why it's risky, but we're sure as shit not going to take responsibility for addressing it when that risk potential comes to reality. Your kid did something, fine, totally innocent, fine. They don't even want to touch it. Oh, we make an announcement. Oh God, barf. Did you send an email too? Did you send an email saying hey, remember, make sure to tell your kids not to search up inappropriate things at home? That's going to work. There's the willful neglect of responsibility, especially on the education system's part, is one thing that's really giving me pause, which is look, you want to get mad at the police department and the sheriff's office for not having enough manpower to go after this. All right, man. You can get mad at them. They're really trying their best. And yeah, maybe there's some places that could try better. Okay. But I talk to a lot of these people, and the people in charge of this particular department and area, they're you have no idea. It's so pervasive. We don't even know what to tell parents anymore, right? It's everywhere. You want to go to the legislators, the one you reference, Representative Cook, I believe.
Senator Cook,
excuse me.
Yeah.
Senator Cook tries to do something, and an onslaught of crap from out of state. He's trying to address something within the state of Idaho to protect Idahoans and their children. And from out of state, these people emerge from under rocks and cracks in a thunderstorm and come down and drop the hammer of the Constitution of the United States in their defense when our children are being preyed upon. Well, God. Okay, Senator Cook, like, thanks for trying. That's a rough one. Like, we're never going to get there. We're not going to solve it unless we educate parents and help them understand how important this is and what's actually happening. It's impossible.
And I think something that, I mean, I just had another experience recently when it comes to technology, it's technology and data tracking. So this is kind of another component of technology in my mind is, not only do we have the apps and then we have the, one-to-one devices. Okay. But now we also have this like data tracking. And it was interesting because this is a new policy that's at my kids' high school. And this is where I think it's so important for parents to get curious, to ask questions, and either do your own research or, as Dr. Adam Grant says, surround yourself with smarter people than you so they can help you and raise you up in, so just to help inform you on stuff. And so that's actually something that I really try. Like, I really want to be surrounded by smart people who can help me navigate all these different scenarios that I find myself in on a regular basis. So, and I don't, anyways, a regular basis. Okay. So,
well, I said something earlier that I really want to just touch on really briefly, if you will. And I know I get, again, as you pointed out, I'm very passionate about this, and I've gained a certain degree of triangulation with the different people I've spoken with. That's kind of like blowing my mind. But of course, nobody else knows all of this stuff because you have to talk to all of these different parties and put it all together to realize, like, oh snap. But the commoditization of our students. Okay, yes, predators in Russia are coming after them. That's terrible. Okay, but we're selling out. We, as in society, are selling out our children by allowing the marriage of tech and education, public education, to flourish. This is an example. If you go onto your phone right now and you look up school bus tracking systems, okay, the number of apps that will pop up for a school district to purchase to track buses and find out time on stop, unbelievable. Okay, you have umpteen apps that are irrelevant. Okay, because we have never in the history of our education system been like, gosh, you know what would just save us? A bus tracker. Like, that's what we need. And if we did need it, it was not something that was like, okay, do you have the GPS? Like, can we just, like, it's like a train schedule. Like, we just, whatever, pickups, drop-offs, fine. But the apps involved to going to a consumer standpoint, which is, hey, parent, you're worried about this, and so let me help you track the bus. And then a school district, because the parent might ask, hey, school district, why aren't you tracking the buses? So, like, why don't you know where my kid is at every moment? There's a brand and a market in the app world that is designed to make things that the education system can purchase. Okay, so a bathroom tracker, a bus tracker, a parking lot tracker, extracurricular tracker, practice tracker, all of these different trackers, right? All of this data is being collected, all of it. And the school districts are in large part doing a very poor job of informing and then attempting to receive meaningful consent, right? So we're tracking all of this. We're collecting data on this. The data is either being stored in the school district for who, by whom, we have no idea. And for what purpose, we have no idea. Or it's going back as a feature of the app to the app developer who's collecting the data. We're collecting data. They don't look at our kids as the 12-year-old trying to learn, Shakespeare or something. They look at our kids as like, this is an anxiety ball and a liability ball. How can we play with these balls to make money? That's what we need. We're going to play the ball with anxiety off the parents. We're going to play the ball with liability from the school district. That's all they're doing. And you have this development of this market to just say, hey, let's get state funding, because how many millions and millions? Do you know what the budget is for education in Idaho? It's quite a bit. If you consider the districts, the amount of money that we get from from property taxes, even within our district. I think it's like the annual budget's in between almost $100 million, isn't it?
I don't know the actual number.
Okay.
I do know I'm familiar with percentages, and it's a roughly 60% of the state general fund, I believe.
Oh, for the state for state education.
From the general
Great.
fund. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Let's just say, listen, what's a few billion between friends? Let's just say that they spend easily $10 billion a year on education. All right. And let's say a portion of that's higher education and then blah, 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 blah. Let's whittle it down to, I don't know, $7 billion.
Okay.
$7 billion. $7 billion in state funding. Okay. All these app developers are doing and tech developers are doing is how can we get that $7 billion flowing to us? We'll replace teachers. We'll help parents and school districts track bathroom visits and cars and practices. We're going to replace textbooks with digital textbooks with little videos in them because you couldn't understand the text in the first place. We're going to replace all of these pieces of education on a subscription-based model so the money keeps coming back to us. And one thing that I always point to people is, look, did you ever take calculus? You took calculus, right? Yeah, great. Love calculus. I love math. You cannot get a textbook in the entire United States that's taught in like a public education setting for calculus that doesn't teach to the TI-84 calculator. So this is the graphing calculator. Everybody uses it. No problem. Casio builds a calculator, right? They build a graphing calculator. It's like $25. It's nothing. The Texas Instrument calculator is $110, the same price it was when you and I were in high school years back, because it's part of the educational system. It's written into the books. It's impossible to teach calculus without this calculator. So they can charge whatever they want. They're American as apple pie and Chevrolet. You'll never get away from the TI-84 as long as every single teacher and every single student in the United States needs the TI-84 to teach calculus. What do you think they're doing with the Chromebooks? What do you think they're doing teaching kids how to use Google Docs in like third grade? As if they need to. What do you think they're doing with the video editing apps that they have our middle schools using? Why are you teaching kids to use video editing apps and then having them upload their video projects to a social media platform where each of the students can comment on the videos, give them likes, give them thumbs up, track the views of the individual book report projects that are no longer written or typed? They're made in video. Now, I love video. I love teaching my kids how to edit video. I want them to learn to write a book report and not have every student in the class or school be able to view and judge the book reports. Mm-hmm. This is what's happening in our schools today, right now. And it's unconscionable knowing what we know. We had to reach out to our son's teacher regarding the video book report. And like, I was into it. I'm like, oh, great. You're doing a book report, like, or excuse me, a video thing. And he made it funny. And he had this like, you know, he's into it. I'm like, yeah, awesome. I love video editing. Let me like help. I want to share this thing with him. No problem. And I can look past. It's like, all right, you'll do a written book report later, but like, we'll do this video one. No problem. The second I realize he's running back to his computer, he uploads it finally. He's very proud of it. And all of a sudden he keeps going back to his laptop, which was in the cabinet. We put it in our pantry, plug it in. No, don't touch it. We're like, hey, what are you doing with that? He's like, oh, I want to look at my video. I said, okay, like, look at it. Fine. Goes back another 5 minutes. Wait, you just looked at your video again. You know what your video is? He's like, no, I want to see if anybody saw it. Like, what do you mean? I pull it over and it's literally a platform where every single video was posted for everyone to see, not just the kids in the class, because somebody was going through these videos, commenting on them who was not in the class.
Wait, full stop. What?
6th grade. He uploads his book report, his book video. Okay. It goes into a folder.
Yeah.
All of the book reports with thumbnails. Some of these shot in kids' rooms, by the way, with no blurring background. So now you have entrance into a child's bedroom. Okay. Hang on. And then you can track likes. You can track view count. You can filter everything by likes and view count. And you can have two-way communication on it. And there was a gal in a different 6th grade class that was going through and making comments on these videos.
Like a student or a teacher?
Student.
Oh.
So now the whole school, or at least that 6th grade class, has access to this person's work. Now, I don't know about you. I'm not going to say that I was proud of my work that I was delivering in 6th grade, nor would I be proud of my bedroom, the way I looked, my capacity to talk in front of a camera, any of these things. Why are we doing that? And everyone knows that the second my kid did it, the second he uploaded it, the anxiety hit. Has anybody looked at it? Oh my gosh, has anybody commented? Anybody else liked? I was like, holy, what is happening? And it's literally the teacher. I reached out to the teacher instantly. I was like, hey, listen, thank you for doing this project. Try to be gracious. I'm very excited about it. Can you turn off the social media? Can I deliver a zip drive or something to you? Like, why are kids doing this? Like you literally just made a social media platform for English. Like, what are you doing? She's like, well, it's never been a problem. I guess I can turn it off. Like, yeah, turn it off. Turn it off right now. Because it's not just not helping my son. I guarantee you it's not helping any of those other kids.
Yeah, it's interesting because of all the things that you say, one of the things that I pulled from that was the comment of, well, it's never been a problem before. It's almost like this phrase or this idea of, well, we've always done it this way, or it's never been a problem before. And I think to myself, isn't it great that someone's brought a different perspective that you haven't thought of before? Like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way before. Thanks for bringing it to my attention. You're right. Actually, what this has done in this moment, maybe what the teacher was trying to do was create an opportunity instead of, how like when we were in 6th grade, maybe you'd like put your thing on your desk and your peers would walk around and you'd all see it together. This is an opportunity maybe in this setting for all of the students. She's thinking like, hey, all of the students in the class can see the thing, which seems like it would be normal. But what's happening is, as you mentioned, is that it's contributing to the social anxiety of a child and having this need to go back and continually see, has someone liked my stuff yet?
I want you to envision something, okay?
Okay.
And I think you have a good point, but let's visualize this, okay? Let's say they did write them out, okay? These are written reports, okay? And you go into the classroom the next day and each of them is pinned up onto a wall, okay, for anybody to go and read. And next to them, they have people that are Velcroing hearts on it or thumbs down on it. There's a counter with the number of people that came up and read the report on top, right? But like a little running, like a train station. And what's even better is there's a collection of sticky notes right on there where people write either great job or whatever. Boom. And let's make the charitable assumption that the majority of the comments are positive. Okay. Every comment written, something positive. Awesome. Great job. Really interested to read the book. And 4 of the 30 reports have all of the comments. And then the other 26 got bupkis. And then there's this sad little report at the bottom where no one even read it. If you visualize what it would look like for those 6th graders to come in and see that, that's what they had. They just had it on their laptops. But it's just as real world as everything else. And we're doing this and unapologetic about it because she didn't apologize. She didn't say, I'll never do this again. She didn't say, gosh, that's great. These are the other systems I use. Do you think this is a problem for any of those? No. Oh, it hasn't been a problem. I guess I can take it down this time.
Yeah, that's the thing I think for me. And that's kind of what was my initial response, right? It was like, gosh, that's what she's saying to you. Because a large part of me is saying, hey, these are things that we need to have conversations about. This is like the value of what you're creating with Officer Gomez, to teach people and to bring people this stuff so that they can have conversations about it and learn and grow from these experiences. And I am all for, varying of viewpoints, but also kind of offering that dignity to individuals to have these like respectful, crucial conversations. Those are really important to have. What I think is so important in these moments is to know, I really like that visual that you kind of addressed. Like, hey, Alexis, I see what you're trying to say here. Well, back in 6th grade, maybe we just had those reports on our desks and people were walking around looking at them. But if we're comparing it to that idea, this digital version is what it would look like laid out today in class. I mean, I thought that was like, that's really gold.
And you would be appalled. Like if any parent walked in, they're like, oh my God, get this crap down. I don't even care that my kid got all the comments. I don't care that my kid, I would say that. I'm like, what are you doing? Like this kid, little Johnny, who only got 0 reads and no likes, he probably needs help. He doesn't need to be ostracized. He doesn't need to pathetically compare himself in an inappropriate manner to other people who maybe had parental help. Right? Like, are you kidding? And we're going to tell kids that this is part of the academic system, that they have to make videos and then publish them onto social media platforms. That's all they're doing. That's 100% what they just did.
Yes. Kind of in the name of, well, this is what's out there in the world today, kind of something
Sure.
Right. This is what's out there in the world today. And hey, we need to teach kids to know how to use it. I mean, you said that just like not that long ago, right? That the education system, what some of the things that you've heard is, hey, we need to teach kids because parents aren't teaching kids how to use this stuff. And
they might have an inappropriate relationship with technology. Okay, so now you're saving my kindergartner from me by giving him a Chromebook?
It's a very scary, I think it's a scary perspective to have. Like it's different than, hey, let's help kids who, maybe aren't getting the type of support at home, maybe in other, like their safety needs or their, food needs or whatever. I think that that's something different. But the fact is, technology is happening today all around us. And it's really important for parents to be aware. And like you've mentioned throughout the entire conversation, it's parents who need to be aware because we are going to be the ones that are teaching our kids, saving our kids,
Yes.
in your language, because this is our responsibility as a parent to be aware of these things. So kind of now going to this different component, which is, and you've mentioned it too, that listen, data is being collected. And what's interesting is I've heard this idea recently from a lot of different people. They're collecting data. And I think, yeah, well, they've been collecting data for years. They've been surveillancing. I mean, I think
Sure.
a big part of this happened in 2001 when we had the 9/11 and the government, it was a real kind of big intersection into, hey, we want to start surveilling people more for safety reasons. And this was the avenue in, and many Americans said, yes, for our safety, you can have more access, right? So you kind of just start chipping away at these things. And I think it's important to kind of, and there were times before that too, right? That's not like when it started, but so, they're collecting data, someone's collecting data, but it was interesting when someone said to me recently, what are they doing with that data? What are they going to do with it? How long do they have it? And I was like, oh, and I see data things pop up all the time, right? On my computer, something goes wrong and they say, hey, do you want to send this error issue to the software developer so they can fix it? And probably about 50% of the time I say yes. Sometimes I say no, So, but in data collection, it's one of those things where I think, sure, there are academic purposes for tracking data when we're talking about test scores, right? Because we're using our technology to track test scores and it, makes it faster. That's always one of the reasons, right? It's making it faster for people to be able to access the data, to understand, to analyze the data and all those different things. But I think that there's a difference, and this kind of comes back to an experience I just had with my school and a policy that was new for tracking student behavior. And this was something that a friend of mine actually reached out and was like, oh, in my part of the country, I've been having a conversation with people in my area about this. This is interesting to me. So one, that tells me that, hey, it's not just happening here in Idaho, it's happening across the nation. So essentially what it is there's a new hallway policy where, okay, sure, they're having problems with kids congregating during class time in the bathroom, in the hallways. This is not new, right? Educators have been dealing with this for years with kids. So the solution was, well, we will track their bathroom behavior. Okay, that's fine. I'm thinking like a piece of paper or something, right? Like sign in and out. Let's hold these kids accountable to when they leave. Well, an email came out and I didn't even see it. And my kids told me, actually, I think you might have been the one to mention it first, but I found out that there's a QR code and they're using their cell phone to input their name and when they're leaving, when they return, this kind of thing. And all of a sudden it was like, yo, what's happening here? Who's getting that data? How long are they keeping that data? And wait a second, I wasn't even asked if that was okay because, yeah, I get it. We track for academic purposes, but this is not academic. It's behavioral. So I did what I do. I asked my kids because I wanted to hear their perspective. And then I called the principal. and had a conversation with her about it. And the question that I got was, well, why does this bother you? And I thought that that was interesting because it was like, oh, well, what that tells me is it clearly doesn't bother them. They don't have this same perspective. And I thought, well, it bothers me for these 3 reasons. She listened, and then I politely was like, hey, can I tell you all of my concerns with this policy? Sure. Right. And yeah. So we have this conversation. At the end of it, it was very civil. At the end of it, I said, hey, thanks for having this conversation with me. I want you to know I do not agree with this policy. Fair enough. She was like, okay, your kids don't have to be tracked in this way. But what that tells me is it's like voluntary. And I wasn't given that option. And by the way, when I went back and looked at the email, there's no notification in there on a QR code. There's no indication that data is being kept. There's no indication about how long none of those things. It just basically says they're going to sign out, they're going to get an electronic hall pass. That's all the email says. So, okay, yeah, my kids are, precluded. They don't have to be a part of it. But I told her it's not just my kids. It's all the kids. I'm not just thinking about my kids. I'm thinking about all the kids here. So I do a little bit further now because I literally cannot help myself because I'm thinking wait a second, this really bothers me. And so I called my friend who's a legislator who knows policy. And I just said, and a part of me does it for like a reality check. I like to check in with a few people. Am I getting emotional about this?
Yeah, we outsource our sanity and we check in. And if people are like, hey, that's a little crazy, you're like, oh, I'll walk myself back. But we outsource.
Right. Yeah. So I call her and I say, hey, present this scenario because she's also an educator. And she can totally understand. She's like, listen, I get what they're trying, what's the problem they're trying to solve here. And okay, yeah, as an educator, we do deal with, kids' bathroom behavior also. Yes. I totally get those things. I just don't agree with the solution, with the way, their rollout and how they're doing it. And so I was like, is there a state policy? Is there a district policy? What do you think? And so right there, because she's a policy expert, this is what she does. Sure enough, she points me to the parental rights in education, which is just something, this is very recently added to from Superintendent Critchfield last year. And as I'm looking at this, so for everyone, it's Title 33 in education, Chapter 60. I look all the way down, and sure enough, I see that if they're going to have a non-curricular related survey, one, it has to be approved by a designated district employee. I don't know if that happened or not. I didn't ask. But 2, there has to be parent consent if it's going to track certain types of like psychological, mental and psychological behavior, which I would argue that this falls under. And so I sent my polite email back, hey, I don't agree with the policy, but I do think that I'd like you to reassess this. And if you determines that you go forward, you have to get the parents' permission to do so. And that's something that I really think, for me, I love about Idaho right now is that, hey, we do have parental rights. We need to be aware of what our parental rights are. You can just go to the website and see it real quick. But there are things that we can do. And and this is not a knock for me towards the administration. I think that they saw this problem and they wanted to, they worked to address the problem. Fine. I think that's good. But I do think that everyone is fallible and we miss things. And when we miss things, it is important for other people to step up and say, hey, I see this I'm concerned about this thing. Let's talk about it. Let's maybe reassess it in that way. That's what's really important in this whole piece, like this entire conversation with me, is that this is why it's so important in our school communities for adults to be aware and to not be afraid to say something. We really need, I think we need more people to say something in those civil ways, those civil, respectful, kind ways, because this is how we're going to improve and grow and help our kids stay safe.
I couldn't agree with you more. And again, at the core of that is parents standing up for their kids, right? We need more people that are going to protect our kids. Now, yeah, we can protect our kids at home. We can go through scams. We can go through best practices. We can remove technology, all these things. But these are our kids. These are our schools. These are ours. and they are behaving in a manner that is incongruous with their charter. They are not designed to be funding arms for tech companies. They are not designed to track our children in a non-academic manner. They are designed to educate our children in a manner that reflects our community values. That's what they're here for. And they have sold out our children. And we collectively, in the most appropriate way possible, need to stand up and be like, hey, look, I don't agree with this. And by the way, I got to be honest with you. If you can just remove my kid from this policy, then not only is it not mandatory, it's not necessary. Because if you don't care at all and all I got to do is like take it off, then it's not that mandatory. Or excuse me, it's not that necessary. That's just the reality of it. So why are you doing it? And I have to I have an obligation now, essentially a moral obligation to tell other people about this because their kids are being tracked too. And you know who's not telling them? You're not telling them. And you don't even have a reason why. You don't have a reason why. Again, I think the best and most charitable interpretation, as you're getting to, is look, we have people in education that might have, that absolutely do have good intentions. And yeah, they're always bad actors. But the majority of people in education that are volunteering for things, that are taking crappy pay and like trying to help kids, they're probably in it for good reasons, right? Because they like kids. And they are being sold a bill of goods like margarine that is just going to kill us all. And they don't see it because they're not putting everything together. And they are beholden to these problems. And they're getting presented with hammers all day long. And all of these hammer proprietors are saying, hey, there's a nail, there's a nail, there's a nail. Use this hammer and hit that nail. And they're doing it. And they're like, well, we whacked this nail. Isn't that good? It's like, why is that good? You got one-to-one technology with a kindergartner. Isn't that good? Why is that good? Well, like, it's good, right? Why? Articulate why. Well, we have some kids that are homeless. Okay, kid homeless, that's bad. Technology in a kindergartner's hand. I'm not following. And these are actual conversations I've had with people. I don't understand. It doesn't make sense. I'm not arguing with people. I'm not telling them they're bad people, but you're right. It's taking back our schools from the tech companies and the well-intentioned educators that have led them astray.
And I think there's another component of this that I think is really important, and something that I experienced as a school board member was that, hey, our school board members, it's really important for them to be aware of this. Like, not only like, so as myself, like if I'm looking at this scenario with this hall pass policy, I've also informed my school board member, not because I want him to get involved in this situation. That's not why. It's because as a school board member, he should be aware of maybe this question of which I posed was, well, how long are they holding on to this data? And who gets to look at this data of our kids and their hallway movements? And when are they going to dispose of the data? I mean, I remember being a school board member and there was something about a safety issue and they didn't have, adult eyes everywhere. So they put up some cameras outside just to monitor behavior. And one of the questions that was asked by the board when they were informed that this was going to happen by administrators was, who gets to look at this footage and how long is this footage kept? And it's really important for us to help our parents and patrons be aware of what's happening here. So like for all of my school board member friends who listen, it's about you being aware and asking those questions because you're also responsible for helping educate our kids. And that includes keeping them safe from things that are harmful. So when I remember when you asked me, why do we have one-to-one technology in our school district? Or no, you first asked, I think you were asked like, what's the benefit or something like that.
Right.
And then like, why do we have that? And I remember telling you one individual's name because several years ago, COVID happened and they said, technology is so important. We need to get a 1-to-1 ratio for our students, as if it was a badge of honor, a medal that they got to put up on the wall that, look, now West Data has a 1-to-1 district technology, for
policy,
right. For all kids. And I remember thinking at the time, hey, that's great. Like we're in the midst of COVID. All these crazy things are happening and we still want to educate kids. And this is the way to do it. And this was something that you mentioned earlier, which is, hey, that worked then, but why can't we stop? Why at some point can't we say that was good for that time, but it's not good today. And maybe we should adjust and move forward in a different way. We can stop, we can change. Just because we've been doing it that way for 3 or 4 years doesn't mean we can't stop. And by the way, how are we going? This is like a little bit of a side note, but it's also very expensive to be able to pay for these things that, gosh, we're paying for technology, but we're also paying for teachers to be in the classroom. A human contact with my child goes much farther than my kid being on a computer on a screen. My kid wants the contact with the teacher. So yeah.
Whether they know it or not.
Exactly.
Because they are not going to be able to regulate themselves and be like, this is really bad that you've hooked me up to this technology. Oh, I'm really upset. Like, they will report after the fact. They will behave poorly. They will be strung out and crazy and will medicate them. But like, they need, whether they want it or not, they need human contact. And like, look, you ever broken a rib? It's not fun. I've broken twice.
I've never.
Twice. Broken 2 ribs, right? One off my sternum, one over here. It's not the business. It's not very fun.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is in both cases, they gave me Vicodin. And in that moment with a broken rib in an emergency room, I took the Vicodin. I was like, God bless America. Right? I mean, it's like this bone sticking out. I was like, do you have another?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. In that moment of crisis, that really worked. Now, if I was still on Vicodin, would that be good? Absolutely not. And you're like, but whoa, Matt, you were in a very unique state of existence. You were in a lot of pain. You didn't know what was going on. Yeah, that Vicodin was good for you then. Yeah, we were in COVID. We didn't know if we were going to die. We were being, in the first few weeks, we thought we all knew people that were going to die if we survived. We didn't know. Our kids are at home. We realize we're getting locked in. Yeah, get the technology out. Get the technology out. You're not able to be that ignorant now, because not only were we successfully educating the majority of people to whatever degree our education system was successful pre-COVID, it's not better now. It's not like, we integrated these computers and we jumped up 25%. That's not happening. You're not doing it any better than what you were doing before. And you've inserted risk into my child's life. And you didn't even warn me. And now you're defending it with this nonsense of, this is how we've always done it. For the last 36 months, this is how we've always done it. For the last 48 months, that's not, you guys went online in 2 weeks. However hard it is for teachers to change, they change real fast. 2 weeks, they started, I didn't even know what Zoom was. I was in education. That's my entire career. It was SAT prep, college entrance. I went onto Zoom in 12 hours. Saturday, I realized we were not coming back. I had a full round of students coming in on Sunday. I got, all of the gear, all of the workbooks, everything to like 50 students in 12 hours and went online. I had never even logged into Zoom. Okay, we can change real fast when we need to. And now that we know it's hurting students and we have no academic validation for continuing down this path, we're going to use the, it's tough to change excuse. Get out of here. Right. Come on. Come back to reality.
Get out of here.
Get out of here.
Okay. So as you know, because you sit in the corner and, make sure that all the audio is just right. And that's not like weird or creepy. You're over there like as the producer, for my podcast, that I always do 2 key takeaways at the end, right? Like if you're going to remember anything from the episode, kind of take this away. And so actually I'd love for you to go first. Will you go first? What's like one of your key takeaways like from the conversation today?
I am not the only one, because I firmly believe, as crazy as I sound when I get a hold of you and I'm like screaming into my cell phone, because again, as I've become more and more educated and understand the workings of all of these different groups, it's become more apparent to me that we're in trouble. I think my initial call and your reaction to that versus what the conversation we're having now, that's different. And I think you get at least some of what I'm getting to. We're not the only ones. If somebody can make it through this podcast and be like, hey, I think they're wrong.
Message us.
Oh my God. I would love to host you on my podcast. I'll just turn on the cameras. I won't even say anything. Just respond to the statements I've made. And by the way, check them all. Call your sheriff's office. Call your police department. Ask them if they have your district's technology in their evidence lockers. I guarantee you the answer is yes. It's just one phone call. And you will then know that your school either does know that they're in there and they haven't said anything, or they're ignorant. Both are terrible. So I'm not the only one. And I think you would agree with me on this. I think we can be the solution, right? Talking to you about the things that you've, and again, on and off air, talking to you about the experiences you've had with the school and then, the policies in place, all these things. It's great to know there's a solution, and there's only one. We don't even have to look because there aren't two. Parents are the solution. Mm-hmm. The school's not going to do it. The policies in place are not going to do it. The failed attempt to curtail tech's control over us, that's not going to do it. We're going to do it. And that's great because now we just have to get to work, right? We need to work together and we need to be as respectful as possible.
That's right. I'm very much about respect. Yeah. But yeah, there's this. Okay. Thank you. That was awesome. Right. Okay. So here's
one of your takeaways can't be that Matt's crazy. That can't be a takeaway.
That can't be a takeaway. One of my takeaways actually is, my key one is that it actually, the example stems from a book that I'm reading called The Poison City. I think the author is Anna Clark. I can't remember her last name. Sorry. The Poison City just recently came out, and it's about the Flint, Michigan water issue. It's a great book because the author goes through, she's an investigative journalist, and she goes through on kind of like the local, individual level, the local city level, just in terms of like public employees, and on the state and national level. And really one of the things that she's saying is, hey, this story is not just it's more than about this water system of, the water issues that occurred in Flint, Michigan. With the bad water. It's about this water that connects us, these pipes that connect us through our communities. And as she was going through the story, one of these major themes that I pulled out of the book is that when these local citizens were having water issues and they were noticing it in their water and they were bringing it up to the public employees and public administrators, they got this look and these responses of nothing's wrong with your water. I mean, they heard that for over a year. Nothing's wrong with your water. As a city, we've tested the water, and these citizens were like, well, I've tested my water. I'm getting sick. My dog died. Just all of these different stories. And I'm almost at the end of this book. And it's just like I have like an hour and 20 minutes left of listening, right? Like
the audiobook.
The audiobook, yes.
I love audiobooks. God bless them.
They're essential.
They are. If you have time to sit down and read a book, you're leading a bougie life. Like, oh my, I need to be like running in my car while I'm driving somewhere and like I'm transporting myself and listening to. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Okay, so
I didn't mean to interrupt. So
no, it's good.
So officials telling everybody there.
So officials telling everyone that there's nothing wrong with this water, but these people know that something is wrong. And ultimately, the change happens with the people coming together. They know it. They feel it. They've seen it. Something is wrong. And over time, what they notice is that all of these people who have this feeling and this observation and that something is wrong, they've come together over this shared belief. And they do something about it. Change happens. And then it's all of a sudden, now people are acknowledging that something's happening. It's not that people were trying to be deceitful before, right? As they're investigating what exactly happened here. But eventually things change. It flips around and people are able to get the correct water to come into their houses. But no one would have believed. And even myself, as I watched this story unfold several years ago, I remember thinking, why would the city provide bad water to people? That doesn't make sense. But the fact is, it was happening unintentionally through bad pipes. Kind of a creation of several bad things coming together. Right. That's what happened. And as I have participated in this conversation with you about technology and kids, one of the things that I think about is exactly what happened in Flint, Michigan. That no one is intentionally, I just have to, as I think about my public school administrators, right, and even my people in the community, I don't think that anyone intentionally in those scenarios, I'm not talking about predators, are trying to harm our children.
Yes.
But what we need are parents and citizens that care, that see it, that come together and help create that change, help bring that awareness. That is so essential. That's what happened in Flint, Michigan, and it happens everywhere in the United States. This is how so much change takes place. One person sees it, another, they come together, and then something, when it's something big, that something happens. Right. So we need more people to see, to be aware, to speak up. I want more parents, just even in my high school, I would love it if another parent would reach out to the school. So often I hear people tell me, Alexis, I can't do what you do. I can't do what you do. And I just think, yes, you can. It maybe sounds a little more eloquent from me, only because I've been practicing for 20 years at this. I did not sound maybe this kind or this eloquent or nice 20 years ago. And that's not me patting myself on the back. That's me saying, I'm not doing anything that you as another parent couldn't do.
Make it look ugly.
It's
it doesn't matter.
Yes.
Just do it.
Yes.
Just write a crappy email. Don't have a point. Don't understand what you're trying to say, and just say, hey, tech in schools is a problem. I don't like what's happening.
Right. And it's not an attack. Right. It's not an attack on the public administrators. It's an awareness. It's raising an awareness and saying, I think that something needs to change here. And we just need more people. And it's possible because we see examples around it all over the United States of people coming together. And that's what I see you doing in your podcast, The Ranch. I think everyone should go listen to it, even the people who are not in Idaho, because especially these topics that you're talking about in education, in political, and especially these conversations you're having with police officers, particularly Officer Gomez, these are applicable everywhere. It's a universal topic. It's not just a topic to Idaho. And what you're doing and bringing and learning and bringing these things together and then sharing for free, by the way, anyone can access this information that you've got out there, is invaluable. It's so valuable for people. And I really want to encourage people to go check out your podcast and listen to these conversations, and then check out the stuff that you've got coming out in the fall time to help them.
Thank you. And again, it is one of those things. I heard somebody, there's a culture warrior who has been pushing back. He's part of a 3-person team. They were academics, and they realized that the peer-reviewed journals had been captured, and that they were producing work that was substandard, not reflective of rigorous investigation and academic work. And they went, I can't remember this guy's name, but he's been on Rogan several times. That's where I got exposed to him initially. But he said that they went out and they published 20 spoof peer-reviewed journal articles, right? And they actually got them published, and they were nonsense. Several of them were excerpts from Mein Kampf, and they replaced Jews for Men. And then some of them one was the rape culture in dog parks in Seattle, and how people were responding to their dogs humping other dogs and either encouraging it or not, and it being reflective of male behavior, and how they just you have to bring men to heel. All fake, all nonsense. And hearing him, he had accumulated this body of wisdom, and he was so just blown away by it once he put all of the pieces together. And I am not that guy. I'm not going on Joe Rogan. But what I can tell you is I'm getting to a threshold of I can't even talk about this without yelling, as you can attest to. It is so bonkers to me. And again, there's only one solution, and that's us as parents, which is great because we don't have to look to anyone else. We don't have to, persuade legislators or politicians. We're the solution. They will never save us. And that's great. We just have to save ourselves, like we did from sugar, like we do from alcohol, like we do from prescription medication. We save ourselves all the time, and we save our kids all the time. Never going into Albertsons alone for an hour. We save our kids all the time. We know what to do. We just have to start doing it here.
Bless you, Matt. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today and helping us empower parents to know that they can do things and that we can educate ourselves on these issues, and it's essential and vital for our kids and their future.
Yeah, and I have to say, this is a huge goal of mine to be on the Our Kids, Our School program. I've had you on my show so many times, and here I am, changing the world.
Here you are, one podcast at a time. Thanks,
I appreciate
man.
you.
You're awesome.